Wow.
I almost fainted several times.
Like being in class, isn't it? Oh my God.
Yeah, really. So helpful. All right, Sarah, Rex, what's on your mind?
I have a few questions. Did you want to go first, or should I go first, Sarah?
Go for it. I could talk for an hour with my questions I wrote down. So
Sarah,
go ahead, Rex.
You left at Sarah. What I missed? I was talking.
Oh, we joked earlier that I might pass out because I'm so
You're about ready to
sensitive.
pass out.
Joke. I'm not that sensitive. I was going to ask. You mentioned earlier that, or the question was asked about the myth that more partners makes you a better lover. And it made me wonder how many people, or has there been a survey of this, how many people who've had several partners and then when they get married have regretted it?
Oh, that's a good, I don't have a specific statistic. We actually have data on that, and we just haven't sort of gotten that into an article yet. We have scales about regret, about previous relationships, either just the emotional relationship and then the timing of sex and how many people they've had. So we actually have data on that. We just haven't drawn it together, but it isn't a small number. I do know that. I mean, there was substantial. I want to say in the 30% range or something, people consistently expressing regret about the pace of when they started sexuality in their current relationship, and then about the other partners they've had sex with in previous relationships. So it's a substantial percentage, but I don't know the exact number.
I like how you mentioned that people's sexuality, or where their nerves are and how their bodies work, is about as unique as their fingerprint. And that can really have an effect, especially if somebody's had more than one partner, because they might be expecting, well, this is the last person was like this. Why aren't you like this? And that's going to cause all kinds of issues. Is that anything that's come up or discussed?
In fact, let me tell you the most challenging issue with that. So a woman's nerve system, at the bottom of her spinal column, she has a bundle of nerves that goes down to her genital region, and it splits into 3 areas. One goes to the clitoris, the other goes to the labia area, and the other goes to the area below the vagina, which is called the perineum. And the concentration of those nerves has everything to do with what she finds pleasurable when in the sexual experience. And it's unique, like the fingerprint for each woman. It's more complicated than the man's. His nerve bundle goes primarily into the testicle and penis region. And so it's all about that part of the genital area. But hers has these 3 areas, and when she likes to be touched, how in those 3 areas is totally unique to her. So it's exactly like you're saying, they have this template from a previous relationship. Well, this is how sex is. Well, it may not match at all the needs of this particular person. So then you have to sort of start, why is this not working for me? And it's because I'm acting on a whole nother person's body template that's not the same. Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked how you said that a better approach to, I'm guessing, in a relationship or generally marriage, for sex is like focus on the woman and find out what's more. I'm probably going to say it the way you said it, but it was just like, take your time before you even just don't jump into it, but find out what pleasures her and gets her in the mood and all that kind of stuff. Because men are much more, a little more quick to activate. And I thought that was really interesting. And something I thought that I'm sure you thought of this, but what popped in my head is starting over like that slow over a period of time seems like it would really build a lot of positive anticipation for when, the one session you finally do get into the actual act of intercourse.
Yes. In fact, when you look at some of the established sex therapy techniques like sensate focus and massage and that sort of thing, they're all designed to do exactly what you just talked about. You back out of having PVI, and it's now just about learning about your bodies and what you like and when you like it and how you like the touch, and going slowly through this arousal process without this imperative of we need to stop and have intercourse here. And so that's that, the therapist has sort of inadvertently picked up on this need to restart. And they use these terms like sensate focus and others, the fancy terms, to sort of illustrate how they try to get couples to start over, essentially. But the challenge is they don't quite they don't come directly enough at the pace of the male, which is the imperative that has been driving so many couples into corners they don't want to be in. In other words, if he's going to reach orgasm, everything has to be dropped and you have to go to intercourse. Well, that's just a bad equation. It's a terrible equation, actually. And it's going to increase a lot of pain. So you have to help the couple come up with, and premature ejaculation, frankly, is the most common early problem in marriage, in the sexuality area. And that's this same thing. So he's moving too fast, but they have to go into intercourse because of his pace. So you got to break that equation down. We are not going to go to intercourse based upon when he's going to orgasm. He does what he does. It doesn't matter. He can keep being interested. You can keep focusing on the wife. His body does what he does. And you just work until she's ready and she is asking for this experience in terms of intercourse. And then it's going to be a pleasant and not painful experience for her. And everything's going to shift for this couple. So,
that makes me wonder, like, I would think or assume that pornography has really kind of driven a lot of men's, because I guess it's a predominantly male consumed, medium, kind of shaped and created that issue of where, well, we got to rush and this is the way you do it. And this is what I expect. And that kind of thing.
Well,
how is that an issue, and can that be overridden?
You're very, very right. So much consumption of pornography basically it is the sex educator of many males. It's the primary source of information they have about what sexuality is supposed to be like. And unfortunately, the people that are they're participating in that pornography, the actors, they're typically so anomalous. They're not normal people in terms of the way they function sexually. For example, I don't watch the stuff and I don't study the stuff, but I read the research on it. And it typically is males that have an incredibly long duration of their sexual arousal process. So last forever, or even not have a refractory period after sex. That is so unusual. So they're getting this idea that the way the men do this is they can last forever and they never have to worry about a refractory period. Well, that's just not normal. And then the other thing with the women is they're super fast and they're easy to orgasm. And no means yes, all kinds of things, right? That they're sort of dysfunctional. And so then there's this template coming on this males. And you're right, they view it about 2 to 3 times as much as females, but females are viewing quite a bit of it too. So they're both getting these templates about sexuality that are just not helping them start well. They're making assumptions and they feel dysfunctional because I'm not like what I saw and she's not like what I saw or he's not like what I saw. And what's wrong with nothing's wrong with them. They have they just have to have a different sort of template. An alarming thing I just learned last year, right? Went to a conference on sexuality. 30% of couples in the last year in college population use choking during their sexuality. You know where they're getting that, right? It's a common thing. They show that the restriction of air creates an actually an intensity that some people like in the porn industry. So now 30% of regular couples are showing, and you can't restrict oxygen to the brain without damaging it. It's just like going out and playing football and banging your head, Mm-hmm. And so it's crazy stuff they're learning from porn that's just like, this is not good. This is not helping.
Yeah, it's definitely disordered and distorted and putting out a lot of bad perceptions. I was going to ask, it seems that the biggest issue is that sex is such a very vulnerable place for people. Is there, have you found any ways of helping couples override that or get past that, it just seems like people want to protect themselves and it's so vulnerable that they don't want to talk about it or admit that they're maybe doing something wrong or they can improve? Yeah,
I mean, my mechanism, the only one I really know is the educational one. That is, you start talking about it before you have it. Substantially before you have it, you start talking about what you were brought up with, what you understand about sexuality, how you feel about it, what you're worried about, what you're scared about. all those sorts of things. And you start those conversations with each other and in your family so that it's not so loaded emotionally. And it's going to be vulnerable always. And it should be. It's supposed to be vulnerable. But if you add to that vulnerability, anxiety and fear, it's just a recipe for disaster in terms of not being able to have the conversations that you want to have. So talking about it regularly is the best way to sort of bring that anxiety and fear down, I think.
My last thing I'm going to say, and I'll pass it off to Sarah here, is I was enlightened and fascinated to learn like that a lot of women's, from your research, sex drive is determined by their very first few experiences with sex. And if it's uncomfortable or rushed, or they're not, that it's not about them, then they just, okay, that's not a fun experience or anything I really cared about. I've heard a lot about it. It's not that good. And that really affects their view on it for a long time.
Rest of their life sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. That I really feel is fascinating and definitely should be something shared more readily.
Yeah. The crucialness of the sexual debut for a woman has not been talked about anywhere near enough. It's just, and the countercultural pieces of the casual sex and the early sexual debut. I mean, what 13, 14-year-old, 15-year-old is going to get sex right, period, right? They don't have a clue. And especially when they're having to hide from people that, they're not supposed to be sexual. They're in cars. The only thing you learn from sex in a car is to get injured. You don't learn how to have good sex in a car. And so all the contextual factors around sexual debut are not being attended to in terms of the long-term needs of women. And frankly, the men don't find it enjoyable when they know their partner, it hurt, and it wasn't, but they had an orgasm. Yeah. Whatever. And it was a 2-minute thing. Right. Yeah. And so it's still not for either partner being the kind of experience that it could be. And so we need to spend a lot more attention on that sexual debut issue.
Mm-hmm. But that's mainly for women, Dr. Busby, more than men? Do men sexual debut?
Well, there's two distinguishing pieces that make it less difficult for men. And that is, they don't typically have pain when they first have sex. Women do if it's not done well. And that pain is not small amount of pain. It can be quite traumatic for women, especially if they're super nervous about sexuality already, and they're nervous about their body, all these other factors, right? And so men don't tend to have that issue that gets coupled with it like that. And they do have disappointing men's first sexual experiences are often very disappointing to them, but it's often in a reflection of what they feel happened to their partner. And that maybe they pressured them, and maybe they know they went too fast, they know, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's almost more of a reflection of the female experience that, they want. There's often somebody they care about and they want them to have a better experience, but they don't know how.
So again, it really is ladies first. Really is.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Thank you so much.
It's true.
Yeah. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, I was really curious about when you talked about oxytocin versus the testosterone and estrogen. So for older couples, if they're not driven biologically or hormonally, and they want to keep that bond and oxytocin, if they're just both lower desire, is there any research on, well, we just don't, we're good, we don't need to have it that often, or, so is there an amount of time to stay connected? And
good question.
Well, so this is the cool thing about oxytocin, right? Sexual interest can occur from oxytocin, but you have to do the oxytocin things first. And oxytocin is very flexible hormone. In other words, estrogen and testosterone, they have a lifetime decline, which is just inevitable. And you can't do much to control those levels. I mean, some people use medications and there's all kinds of problems with some of those, but oxytocin can be created in about 2 minutes and even faster. A lot of things we do, mindfulness, meditation, exercise, touch, sharing things that are important to you, expressing love, massage, all kinds of things increase oxytocin, and increases it very fast. And so it's under our control. We can do all of these different activities that make us feel and that basically the signal is, do you feel closer to your partner? That's all. And if what you just did made you feel closer to your partner, you're feeling oxytocin. And so do more of that, increase that. And as you increase the oxytocin, it starts to kick in sex drive. So it comes from a different pathway. It comes from the back door. Instead of driven by testosterone and the mating imperative, it's driven by connection. And so you learn to basically do a variety of things that help you feel closer to one another. And then sex is the outcome of that closeness. It may not be a really strong, like, oh, we really need to have sex now. I feel like this intense, but you feel closer to them. And it's sort of the next step, right? Take off some clothes, do a little more touch, right? Get a little bit more intense. And so it naturally leads, and it's a different kind of experience. And you have to learn that experience as couples, because earlier on it was just driven by this hormonal intensity. And so it's a learning process of having sex for based upon different feelings.
We'll be right back after this brief message. And we're back. Well, let's dive right in.
So then a second half of that would be asking for a friend here. If you, okay. So if someone is just kind of like in the same old rut all the time and they think we want to spice this up a little bit, I'm a little hesitant to go on the internet and try to search things out. So what do you like? Are there resources, or what, if you want to spice things or change things up, how do you go about that?
I would probably, I would go to Shalom's website, and I would start with her mindfulness material. Mindfulness is a really fascinating kind of process that starts to increase your oxytocin in life. And initially, the mindful activities are not about a partner. They're learning to be more aware of your environment and learning to focus more on your physical sensations and learning to meditate and such. And those things will increase your natural connection to this part of your body that feels more oxytocin. And then she has them learn how to bring this into the sexual area of their relationship. And so then you learn how to be in a mindful state while you're starting to be sexual with your partner. And that's through the oxytocin channels. It's a very different experience. It's really slow. It's really comfortable. It's enjoyable. And there's no outcome in mind, like we have to have intercourse. It's just, we're working with our bodies. We're helping each other feel loved and connected. And we're staying in this mindful place. And the sex will be very different and sometimes way more powerful. Because it's just a different kind of experience. So that would be a starting point for that, I think. And you have to be careful, like you said, you start going into mindfulness and tantric sex and all this stuff. Boy, does it get strange. It gets so strange so fast. Yeah. And it's like, I don't want to go there. You know, they have coaches that will come with you and show you how to have sex. You know, I don't need another person in my life to do that. But, you know, it just gets weirder and weirder. So it's one of the dangers of the sexual topic.
Good warning, Dr. Busby.
Be careful of
Yes.
Be careful where you tread.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a second to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel at Utah Marriage Commission, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. Be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment, and share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and interact with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and Facebook at Stronger Marriage. So be sure to share with us which topics you loved or which guests we should have on the show next. If you want even more resources to improve your marriage or relationship connection, visit strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, e-courses, in-depth webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producer, Rex Polanis, and the team at Utah State University, and you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission.